What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, May 6th, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is sitting in our control room. We've got a pair of mics, and we'll raise you a Tom or something down the road, or Dan. So he'll be answering the phone when you call on in. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 with her unique perspective on the world. So getting right into it, we're already seeing a major corporate media push to try and trivialize this whole email server scandal. And their coordinated defense is basically, well, Hillary didn't mean to do anything wrong. Okay, she didn't intend to do anything wrong or break the law. Well, if you are distracted and you run a red light and you plow into somebody with your car and you kill them, the fact that you didn't mean to run the red light and kill somebody does not get you off the hook. The she meant well defense is weak just with common sense, and it is completely voided because under Title 18, which is the controlling law regarding espionage and security, negligence is stipulated as constituting a violation. You don't have to intend to reveal top secrets to a foreign power. If you do it by accident, you are still criminally liable. So, as you know, we're hearing about how the FBI is interviewing all of Hillary's staffers and aides, and I noticed that they jumped right on this right after Judicial Watch got Discovery to interview all these people. Now the FBI is rushing forward, trying to get ahead of this and contain it. And I have zero confidence that the FBI and the Department of Justice are going to do their jobs. My nickel is on Judicial Watch. Okay, but there's something that you need to remember. Keep in mind when they talk about, well, there's scant evidence she meant to do anything wrong. It doesn't matter under Title 18. Now, we already know from some of the released emails that on June 17, 2011, Hillary Clinton sent an instruction to her subordinate, Jacob Sullivan, to strip the classification headers off of a document and send it non-secure. That's a violation of Title 18, Section 793. Doesn't matter what was in the document. Doesn't matter even if Jacob actually did it or not. Doesn't matter what reason it was. Taking a classified document and putting it in non-secure space is a violation right there. Giving the order was the violation. Now, apparently, the FBI has interviewed some of these staffers more than once, in particular Huma Abedin. And, again, we're getting mixed signals. I get a sense that there are some people inside the FBI who are very angry at what they're finding. But we're hearing from the Department of Justice, Loretta Lynch, and Director Comey that they're just not going to do anything about this until after the election. Hillary deserves her shot at the Oval Office. No, actually, she deserves a shot at the Big House. I don't think she should even be running because there is a provision in Title 18 that if you are guilty of violating any section of Title 18, you are banned from holding public office. Period. End of discussion. Now, all these U.S. government officials who are going to the media and saying, well, she didn't mean to do anything wrong, and there's no evidence that anything really bad happened, they can't possibly know. Because Judicial Watch just got another batch of Hillary Clinton emails that were germane to her job duties as Secretary of State that were withheld from the State Department. One batch of 103 pages, the second of 138 pages. These contradict statements by Hillary Clinton that as far as she knew, all of her government emails were turned over to the State Department, and it also puts the lie to her claim that she didn't use her private email server until March 18, 2009. Because there are emails going back to February of that year. Now, thank goodness Judicial Watch got an honest judge. There are a few still out there. That stands in sharp contrast to the judge who got Larry Klayman's RICO case against the Clinton Foundation and just threw it out of court without even looking at it. Now, getting on back to the security issue, Guccifer is out there, he's giving more interviews, basically saying there was no real security on Hillary's server. It was like an open orchard. Walk on in, pick something tasty, and walk on out. And what's really interesting is Hillary's use of a private email server from a provider who was not vetted to provide classified systems for the government was a violation of her own husband's executive order. When Bill Clinton was president, he signed an executive order putting very strict rules on the use of private computer networks, that the companies that were approached to set up any outside computer networks for government work had to be vetted by the security apparatus of the U.S. government to make sure they were trustworthy. Hillary didn't do any of that. Now, it turns out that long before Fox News got the Guccifer interview and put it on out there, NBC News had it. And apparently they were sitting on the story at the request of the Obama White House. You know, the public doesn't need to know that there were at least 10 foreign IPs logged into Hillary's server. That's just not important. It's going to take their focus off of human-caused global warming. We can't have that here. But the reality is a lot of people are really getting very angry at the obvious stonewalling, and the anger is building. And it's like Richard Nixon said, it isn't the crime that does you in. It's the cover-up. The American people can actually be very forgiving and tolerant of certain crimes. What they are intolerant of is being lied to and being treated like they're children who have no business knowing what the government that takes so much of their money and so many of the lives of their children is up to. And there's an article that came out over at the original antiwar.com which basically says there is a need to clear up all these Clinton questions. Because in the end, a career spent ducking the consequences of your actions does not qualify you to hold the highest office in the land. And that seems to be Hillary's only qualification, that she's gotten away with so much throughout her career. Now, despite the rhetoric and the bluster coming out of the Clinton campaign and all of these ginned-up polls to say, oh, Hillary is going to defeat Donald Trump in November, there's absolutely no question. Insiders in the Democratic Party and in Clinton's campaign privately are expressing a tremendous amount of concern. Hillary's ascendancy over Trump is not a slam dunk. They're trying to convince you that it is so that you'll just go with what you imagine the flow is. But the reality is that Hillary is leading only in certain very narrow context polls. And the wider polls, Trump has already pulled ahead. And his margin's going to grow for the rest of the primary season. And Trump is hooking into the anger of every American who understands this nation is on a wrong course. And that is a huge voting bloc. Hillary's pandering to minorities and gays and women and illegal immigrants and refugees is not going to be able to overcome that. Mostly because a lot of Hillary's favorite demographics aren't really feeling all that loyal. She doesn't have a lock on the woman vote, despite that big to-do over the woman's card. Most of the illegal immigrants coming in across the border are actually strongly religious, and left to themselves tend to be a little bit more conservative. And Hillary has to be careful. She can't go out there and overtly say, vote for me and I'll take more stuff away from the legal Americans and give it to you. So it's not a slam dunk. And this article actually admits the observation I made early on. Hillary is afraid of running against Donald Trump. She wanted to run against Ted Cruz or any other Republican. Would have been much easier because they're conventional politicians. They play the game by the rules that will allow Hillary to win. Now, we're getting a report here that Trump is actually considering Ted Cruz to be Attorney General. And that would be a very interesting situation because Ted Cruz will not hesitate to go after Hillary for her crimes. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Clinton, Las Vegas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, there's two topics I want to bring up. One is look at the bright side on this. That means Trump gets to beat this over Hillary's head all summer long and well into the autumn. He has made it perfectly clear, and he beat Ted Cruz over the head about his dad standing next to Lee Harvey Oswald. And it was on Wayne Batson Report, and the scuttlebutt is that he was told to leave the race. Even though he lost, he said he wanted to take it to California and contested a convention, but he was basically told to back off because when Donald Trump brought this up and questions started getting asked about it, so Donald Trump, he'll go for that juggler, boy. And I think I kind of want Hillary to stay in the race for a while. Let her keep lying, and let her. Me and you both know they don't bring people in for interviews over security reviews.
No, they don't. This is a criminal action. The Department of Justice has said this is a criminal matter. If they're handing out immunity to people, then they're on a prosecutorial path. They don't need to hand out immunity for a security check. I don't think the issue about Ted Cruz's father and Lee Oswald was all that crucial. The Cruz campaign officially denied it. There was a lack of proof. A lot of people are very concerned over the fact that the guy who broke that story, Gary Welsh, was just found dead in a stairwell in his apartment building. And so there's a lot of that going on. But I think Cruz's primary vulnerability was the growing awareness that he is not constitutionally eligible to serve as president or vice president. He can serve as attorney general. There's no question about that. And maybe that was the deal. Maybe Trump took Cruz aside after Indiana and said, I'll make you a deal. You drop out now, you're the attorney general. And Cruz might have gone for it.
One more thing. This is still a real problem for the FBI because this is a lot bigger audience now with the Internet and the blogs and people's awareness growing, Americans waking up. And if the FBI doesn't do their job, there's a anger out there. They might get away with it with the Hillary bimbos, but there's a whole bunch of Americans waking up, and this is a real problem for the FBI. Who's going to be able to take them seriously ever again? And
well, this is going to be an even worse disaster for the FBI's credibility than the exposure of COINTELPRO back in the 1970s, because we were all raised with the image of the FBI that we are fed on TV and feature films. Really nice guys. They're out there to get the criminals, Silence of the Lambs, the FBI story, and all the rest of it. COINTELPRO showed to the American people that, in point of fact, the FBI is the American version of the Gestapo, enforcing the ruler's will. And, we're once again seeing all of these set-up sting operations, these entrapment operations to manufacture terrorist arrests for the media. We're seeing the FBI literally trying to block off various investigations. As soon as the judge threw out Larry Klayman's RICO case in Florida, the FBI moved in and said, "Don't, it's okay, we'll investigate, we'll look into it. I promise you we'll do a good job." But the FBI's credibility and legitimacy is very much on the line here. And for the head of the FBI to come on out and say that they're not even going to reveal what they know about Hillary until after the election tells you that politics is dominating us, that there is something to cover up. And, hey, as long as they're not willing to give us the facts in their possession, we're free to imagine the absolute worst. And the absolute worst that I am seeing is a repeat of the 1996 Chinagate scandal, where the Clintons were selling military-grade secrets to China in exchange for donations to Bill Clinton's re-election fund. They did it before. Why wouldn't Hillary do it again if she thinks she can get away with it?
One more point. I think this FBI director, I think he's dreaming if he's going to be able to sit on some very, very embarrassing revelations between here and the election.
Well, he may, and he may just keep all that information to blackmail powerful people. I mean, that's how J. Edgar Hoover stayed FBI director for his entire life. He had the goods on all the top politicians. And, every FBI director since then, they've got their private secret files. And, Hillary may be in a position to blackmail the entire government, but Comey is now in a position to blackmail Hillary. And he may be thinking that if he can get Hillary in, if he can arrange for Trump to take a fall somehow, that he will be named FBI director for life.
Well, but Hoover didn't have the Internet to deal with.
No, he didn't. He didn't. And none of the politicians back then had the Internet to deal with. That's why they got away with so much. And now they're very frustrated because here on the Internet and the independent media, we have removed their ability to lie to the mass population with impunity. They can't do it anymore, and they're somewhat flustered. They don't know what to do. They've gotten by with lies, frauds, and deception so long, they've forgotten any other way to do their jobs, and they're stuck. And so they keep raising on these busted flushes. Anyway,
only 6% of the people believe them.
That's true, if that much. Anyway, Clint, got to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I just couldn't believe it when I saw Trump announce this former Goldman Sachs, George Soros partner, this Munchin guy, whatever his name is, and then I saw. Of course, you're talking about Cruz. I think you were just talking about Cruz, or
yes.
Somebody was. The Goldman Sachs connection, the banksters. And then I just heard Dick Cheney is coming out endorsing Trump. My thinking is, if this guy's real, which I'm not convinced he's for real. I'm like you. I think he pretty much is. But, this is scary because it looks like if he is real, they're surrounding him.
Well, there's another way to look at it. Okay, Trump naming this Goldman Sachs former employee to be on his campaign finance chair, he's extending his hand to Wall Street in an above-board, open way. He's going to yank the Wall Street support out from underneath Hillary. And in that context, it may be one of the smartest things that he's done.
Boy, if that's true, I don't know their connection. But Dick Cheney? I mean, there ain't nothing there but just horror. It's a horror show.
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm surprised with so many GOP figures going over to support Hillary to continue the war agenda. I'm very surprised that Dick Cheney wasn't right there at the forefront of the Hillary cheerleading section, although the idea of seeing him in a short skirt and pom-poms is rather nauseating. I think this is the stage where everybody is making deals with the potential candidates for what's going to happen after the person they've thrown their lot in with wins. Cheney may have concluded Trump is going to win, and now it's the time to start building bridges so that he can stay involved in government. Okay?
As long as they're not bringing bombs over on those bridges, right?
Well, yeah, and that is a real issue because Donald Trump may not want to start a war, but these people could start one for him.
Oh, yeah. All right, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Tom in Minnesota. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. Yeah, I was talking about Dick Cheney. That kind of reminds me I was in the Minnesota Republican Party during the Ron Paul run there, and I made an announcement pretty much to all the Republicans at the state convention that Dick Cheney would show me his chest and show there's actually a scar there. I'd give $1,000 if there was. I think he faked the whole thing to stop prosecution after he got out of office.
Could very well be. Oh, feel sorry for Dick Cheney. He's had a heart transplant and blah, blah, blah,
he's
blah.
He's going to die. You won't even have time to prosecute him the way it sounded.
Yeah, that really was. But he's still around. He is still here.
Yeah. I had an article a while ago here on the Clinton Insider who talked about how he had a cover for Hillary going out to California to these meetings for apparently witchcraft or something. Actually, it's not even witchcraft. It's some high Illuminati thing because I remember...
You're not talking about the Bilderbergers, are you? I mean,
No.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, we're gonna have to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Back with the news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Ben Carson is actually working on Donald Trump's committee to vet potential vice presidential picks. And Ben Carson is already denying that he's under consideration. It would certainly fit the model of having a vice president so horrible that it protects the life of the president. But what is going on here, whether it's Ben Carson being brought in on the VP committee, Ted Cruz as possible attorney general, Goldman Sachs on his campaign finance, Donald Trump is already building bridges. He's going back to his former rivals, and he's saying, okay, the people have spoken, I'm the nominee, but you can all come along and we can have fun together, which is a very good way to be doing this. Let's grab a phone call. Bill in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All right. How you doing? When I think about Trump and his vice presidential candidate, he needs to pick somebody who's like him or even would do worse than him, because he needs to have a Teflon vice president. If he takes one of the fellas that they might pick that's already got his hands in the pockets of the regular Republicans, I could see Trump, as good as he wants to be, gets in, somehow has a mistake, he gets assassinated, the other guy gets put in, and boom, business back to usual. So
yeah, I agree with you on that one. You know, Trump has to be very, very careful about his VP pick, because it could be the difference between, you know, serving out his terms in office or having a target painted on his back.
Absolutely, man. That's really where it's at. Well, I would like him to pick a businessman that we've never heard of, that's moralistic, likes God, good family man, someone who really did well for himself, who we can hold him and say, listen, this is a really wonderful man. He believes what I believe, and he's going to be my vice president, and let him try and find something bad about the guy. It would be nothing. And somebody like that would be beautiful. We don't need a name. Trump's got the name. We don't need him to bring in some other name to bring in more votes.
I disagree. I disagree. And, you know, the VP pick is going to swing a lot of voters. I can see a good motivation for Trump picking a woman vice president to draw the woman vote away from Hillary's camp. Somebody who's a minority. I think Cynthia McKinney would be a good choice. If he's not going to go with a female VP, I'd love to see him draft Ron Paul in there. Because as much as everybody hates Donald Trump, they hate Ron Paul just as much. And so that would preclude, you know, any crazed low nut assassins, registered trademark Central Intelligence Agency, from doing something bad to the Don.
I'm a little worried about Chris Christie. I'm from Jersey, and, you know, I know a little bit about Steve Christie, and, you know, he was put in by the guy who ran the 9/11 Commission, Tom Kean,
yes,
in our state. And people have to realize that Christie's really got the backing of the deep guys, and he's standing next to Trump. I'm a little worried about that Christie's kind of can pass some information back to the people who really don't want Trump in there, and you know.
Well, I'm sure Trump understands that, you know, he's being surveilled and spied on, and, you know, they're probably doing bug sweeps on his morning toast every morning just to make sure. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, Peter Schiff is out there. People are now starting to actually look at Donald Trump and his ideas. Up until now, it's been the plain talk, the tough talk, the outsider image, which people have responded to. Trump has tapped into this anger that we, the American people, have with politics as usual. Now he's got to start delivering. What is he really going to do if we put him in the Oval Office? And one of Donald Trump's ideas to deal with the debt is saying, look, in business, you know, debts are negotiated down all the time, where you'll go to your creditor and you'll settle for 75 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar. He said there's no reason why the U.S. debt couldn't be negotiated the same way. Sounds like a really workable solution to me. Of course, we know the money junkies aren't going to like that idea. Their goal is not to collect on the debt, but keep us slaves to that debt until the end of time. We're seeing another article coming on out here from The Independent in the UK. The truth about Donald Trump, most of his ideas are sensible. And a Donald Trump presidency wouldn't be that bad. Now, right now, polls are showing 57% of Americans support Trump's America First idea of foreign policy. This is a direct threat to the New World Order global government cartel. This could seriously, seriously derail their plans to form a global government and enslave us all to a global private central bank. And that's another reason they're so scared of him right now. They've been working at trying to create this new world order for decades. We have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Donald Trump has gone on out and said that maybe, just maybe, Israel ought to be reimbursing the United States for all this defensive aid. That sounds reasonable to me. Israel can afford it. They're a wealthy nation. We, the American people, can't afford this anymore. We can't afford to be sending more weapons to Israel when our schools are crumbling, our roads are full of potholes, our rails are rusty, nuclear waste sites are leaking all over the place, active running reactors are leaking all over the place. Why should we just go on giving it away? Why don't we turn our defense industry into a profit center? If these other countries want our weapons, let them pay for them using their own money. And, yes, we did. Okay, so I think that's a good idea. I think that's a very good idea. Now, Israel, of course, is screaming that we owe them all of this money, all this support, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars because of the Holocaust. Well, if you are like me, whatever it is that was supposed to have happened in Germany happened before we were all born. It's got nothing to do with us. We're all living here in the 21st century today. And we see that Israel is a tremendous drain on our nation. And it really is time for it to stop. Let's put our relationship with Israel on a business-like footing. They want something from us, they should pay us. And quit the whining about things that supposedly happened in the middle of the last century. Because as I recall my history, whatever it is that happened in Germany was not the fault of the United States of America. In fact, as I recall my history, we were on the side that stopped the Nazis from doing whatever it is they were supposed to be doing. Of course, Israel's response is, you didn't do enough. You didn't act soon enough. You should have done more, and that's why you will inherit the collective guilt. Well, I reject the idea of collective or inherited guilt. I'm not responsible for the evil other people do. I won't take credit for the good other people do, which is why I'm never going to be in politics. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm beginning to warm to this Donald Trump. I was a bit skeptical in the beginning, but I'm beginning to warm to the character. He seems to be suggesting that Britain should exit the European Union.
Yes.
And just be part of that trading bloc, but not be part of the Union itself. Just like Norway and Turkey and several other little states around the edges of that corporate entity. But what it means is that if Britain exits, TTIP is out the window because it relies on everybody being part of it.
Well, France has already said they're not going to sign it. France has already... Why am I getting an echo? Do you have your speaker up? Okay, France...
No, I've got cancelling on it. It doesn't give any feedback at all, Michael.
Okay, well, I'm hearing my own voice here, so something's going wrong here. France has already said, in the wake of the Greenpeace leakage of 280 pages of the TTIP, France has said, we are not going to sign it. Down in New Zealand, their government has blown the whole non-disclosure agreement. They put the entire text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership out there. I just got sent a zip file with all of those documents saying this is absurd, and they want the public to know what the U.S. has been trying to pull with all of these things. So I think both of these transoceanic partnerships, and they're not really partnerships, it's the rise of corporate governance, they're in serious, serious trouble now that the public is aware of what's going on.
Well, I think his other proposals, like making nations pay for their own defense, will break NATO up. I think people are just not going to be spending that amount of money when we're already involved in huge austerity measures all over Europe. It looks like he's on the right track everywhere as far as I'm concerned. As I said, I'm warming to this character the more I hear his policies and what he's saying.
Well, I think that's going to be a general trend. Now that we're past that, hey, look at me phase, people are starting to seriously look at what he's really saying. And it's interesting. There's an article that came out over 21st Century Wire. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, defensive realist versus war hawk. And basically saying that Donald Trump wants a strong home defense but he's not about intervening in other countries, whereas Hillary is a continuation of the current U.S. policy of just shoving into any other country that isn't doing what they're told to do and change their government, either by overthrow, coup d'etat, or war. And it occurs to me reading this article that the 2016 general election is way beyond Republican versus Democrat. It's way beyond conservative versus liberal. It's way beyond man versus woman. The 2016 general election is going to be a referendum on the direction of the United States of America as a whole. Because it should be obvious at this point, Donald Trump wants to turn the wheel. And Hillary Clinton wants to step on the gas. And I think if people really think about what's been going on in the United States and how it's affected them, I think they're going to be moving away from Hillary Clinton because what she's promising is more of the same.
I think, as I said, I'm warming to him because many of his policies now seem more common sense than agenda-driven. So, yes, I like what I'm hearing at the moment, but it can always change. But, yes.
Yeah, he is talking common sense. You know, same thing that Ron Paul did. Everything he's dealing with the real issues. He's not trying to come up with fringe issues for people to fight about like gender identity in restrooms or all the rest of that nonsense. He's talking about the real problems. Our economy's in trouble. We're overextended militarily in all these other countries. You know, our government has just gotten into the habit of impoverishing the American people in order to make very generous gifts to private corporate interests and certain governments around the world. And it's time for it to stop.
Well, I'm looking at what John Kerry said about Assad, and I fear that this nonsense that he's talking about in August, that Assad must be gone, I think that is going to be putting the war agenda in place before Donald can reach the White House.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not just in Syria. You know, if they actually think Trump is going to win the general election in November, they are going to get war with Russia and China going before he can take office. And then they'll say, Donald, you must fight it out. You know, you cannot turn the course without dishonoring the and all this other nonsense stuff. But yeah, definitely. All right, well, listen, John, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And there is one other aspect you need to be thinking about when it comes to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Now, pay attention. Justice Scalia's seat is currently vacant. Ginsburg is 82 years old, Kennedy is 79, Breyer is 77, Thomas 67. Right now, the actuarial tables are showing the average age of a Supreme Court retirement or death is at 75. That means, in all probability, there are going to be 5 Supreme Court vacancies that will likely come up over the next 4 to 8 years. The next president coming in will have the power to potentially create a 7-2 Supreme Court skewed to their ideology. 7-2. And that will basically lock the Supreme Court into a given particular ideology for the next generation. So we already know that Hillary Clinton wants to use the Supreme Court to take away our Second Amendment rights. She's already out there saying the Heller decision was wrong and we need to overturn it. We've got to remove the individual right to keep and bear arms. Only my Secret Service protective detail and the police and the military ought to have guns. So you better think about it very carefully because that Bill of Rights, it doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to you and me. That Constitution is the property of we the people, not the government. And Hillary is already out there saying she will use the Supreme Court to declare war on our rights. So that's another reason to be thinking very, very carefully about voting for Hillary Clinton because it will mean an entire generation of Americans dealing with a Supreme Court that's going to be arguing over which restroom you can use and how you shouldn't have guns, and political correctness will be the law of the land. Meanwhile, of course, Ted Cruz's supporters are out there whining and crying and saying, how could Ted Cruz have lost? God said he was going to be the president. He was anointed to be the president of the United States. They actually believe that. And we're running around saying that. Well, you know, if God wanted Cruz to be president of the United States, why did he have him born up there in Canada? is always my question. But apparently there were people who were actually out there really believing that Ted Cruz was chosen by God to be our next president. Now they're all saying, Donald Trump beat God? We can't have that. That's just terrible. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mike in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I got a question, and this goes back to even Bush or, Obama. When I saw who Obama advisors were, like Ram and Larry Summers and stuff, and I said, no, I'm not going to vote for him. Now, I would suggest that to clear the air, that Donald would nominate his advisors and some of the people that he would put in, like Secretary of State and a few other cabinet positions are very important.
Yes.
But even DOD, because that way I'll be clear that he's really true to what he's saying. Look at Bush. Bush surrounded himself by these neocons, the Wolfowitz, the Fights, the Abrams, and look what he got him. So it's very important to make sure that these advisors are working for America. That's my drift.
Well, we're hoping that Trump's entire administration is going to be working for America. We already know there are people who are trying to get in on the inside by hook or by crook to try and hijack it or at least divert it. The most important thing that we the people can do right now, along with getting Trump into the White House, is we have to pink slip all those old fossils in the Congress who are part of the war agenda, who are friends of Israel, who are going to work to basically stonewall Trump just because they're angry that he got the nomination and possibly the White House. And we need a fresh group of outsiders in the Congress to go along with our outsider president so that they're all going to work together and change the course of this nation, pull it back from this abyss that we're at the edge of.
Yeah, well, I hope Obama, in the time that he got left, doesn't start something with Russia. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, I share that concern because those people who want that war with Russia and China, they'll start it before the end of the year, just to hand it to Donald Trump as his inauguration gift.
God help us all.
Yes. Okay?
Anyway, that's all I had. Anyway, Mike, thanks for your good work.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call, Mike. We're going to let you go here. Now, interestingly enough, up in Maine, this superdelegates controversy is having a backlash, and their legislature is getting ready to pass an amendment to the state constitution that will eliminate superdelegates. And they're hoping that even though it wouldn't officially take effect until 2020, its passage would allow Maine to strongly suggest that Maine superdelegates vote in accordance with the caucus results and not just go on off and sell their vote to the highest bidder, which we know Hillary's been doing. Cruz was trying to do it. Didn't work for him. All right, so let's turn to the war zones. Earlier in the week, there was an attack on a refugee camp. And, of course, immediately the Western media was out there saying, Bashar al-Assad is bombing Syrian refugee camps. And as was the case with their claim that he was using sarin gas on his own Alawite supporters, what they didn't have was a reason for Assad to do something like that. There's no reason at all. It didn't make any sense from the beginning. Now we are hearing that investigators at the actual refugee camp is saying that the damage pattern is suggesting rocket artillery rather than an airstrike, and nobody can find any radar data showing any aircraft over the area at the time. Oh my goodness, the government and the corporate media lied to us again? Horror on horrors. Now, we are hearing confirmation that John Kerry is out there saying that the U.S. is going to change to a different track in August if Assad has not stepped down. Despite all the pretense of making peace with Syria and the Russians, the U.S. is still very much on top of its original agenda, which is to get Bashar al-Assad out of Damascus and install a puppet regime. And because Donald Trump does look poised to win the White House, they have to do it this year. They've been trying to do it for going on 5 years. This is going to be the final push. Will they do a ground invasion of Syria? I rather doubt it. because that would bring them into direct conflict with Russia. And yes, there are those who want that, but it might be a conflict that the U.S. would use, and that would lose and put the brakes on the rush to a larger great state war. What I expect is going to happen is Kerry's different track in August is going to be drone strikes on Assad himself. But it's very clear who the aggressor is in this situation, and they're already back to the same tactic. Oh, Assad is bombing refugee camps. He's using sarin gas. He's tearing the tags off his couch cushions. He took the last cookie out of the cookie jar. He's a bad person. You should hate him. And therefore, everything we do to him is justified and blessed by the imaginary playmate in the sky. Now, over at 21st Century Wire, Henningsen is basically taking a very cynical view of the current Aleppo ceasefire, saying it is simply a ploy by the United States to buy time to reinforce the U.S. puppet terrorist group. And remember, when they were negotiating the Aleppo ceasefire, Russia called the U.S. out for including in the ceasefire area Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, ISIS locations, in order to basically give them time to rebuild and get ready for another offensive. So everybody knows what the U.S. is really doing in Syria. And I guess either the U.S. government doesn't care if you know that they're lying, or they're actually still convinced that they're fooling you. And that is a very dangerous, reckless attitude. If they're that out of touch with what the American people are really thinking, that increases the possibility of them making a seriously critical mistake. All right, we've got another break for commercials here. We've got somebody waiting on the line. I'm going to get your phone call as soon as we're back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Mike in Brazil. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I'm glad you're back on RBN. It's a much better reception. And I'd like to talk about three things here about the Supreme Court. I'm looking at the back, the decisions taken in, 20, 30 years ago about abortion, about death penalty, and each Supreme Court session declares one to be constitutional and the other one not to be constitutional. I don't know. This is very conflicting.
Well, there's an important point you need to remember, okay? The Supreme Court has assumed that interpretation of the Constitution is up to them. It actually isn't. It's not in the Constitution. Okay.
This is what I was going to say. My next point is somehow we need to remove the Supreme Court from interpreting the very Constitution itself, including the Bill of Rights. We have a constitutional court, Supreme Court, saying that abortion is legal. Then we have another one saying that it isn't illegal. Then about the death penalty, it was constitutional. Then it isn't constitutional. And this is it's like a sick joke the way I see it, because they conflict. Their decisions are so conflicting from one Supreme Court to the other. And my third point that I was going to talk about, I know there will be an attempt on Donald Trump's life, without a doubt.
Yes.
If this guy makes it into the phase of elections, they will probably try to kill him before that, just like they did with RFK.
I think more than likely, they'll try and take him out before the convention.
I know that. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% sure they will assassinate him. And my question is, how do you think they are going to achieve this assassination? Because shooting him is going to be very obvious. Poisoning him doesn't stand a chance because Trump has his own cook, his own personnel there. So that would be another question.
They could sabotage his aircraft.
The only way I can think they might try to assassinate him is just to blow him out of the sky with a Stinger missile or something, and claim
it was Putin shot him down.
Putin shot him down.
Putin shot him down with a Buk missile. Gosh darn it! And we were just getting used to the idea of Trump as president.
This would seem the most viable way to get rid of Trump, to assassinate him and make it look like it was an accident or some terror off Long Island. aimed a missile and took Donald Trump out of the air.
Well, they could also try and sabotage his aircraft, and there was one incident earlier on in the campaign where Trump's plane did have to make an emergency landing when there was some unspecified mechanical failure on board the aircraft. And I'm sure that Donald Trump spends the money to take good care of that airplane of his.
I hope he knows his technical personnel taking care of his plane. I hope he knows them very well. Because,
yes.
The CIA has a nasty habit of infiltrating, places such as
for enough money, you can get anybody to do anything. Anyway, listen, Mike, I got to let you go. We got to take a station break, and we'll be back with hour 2 of our program. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Back to the war zones. Apparently, the British government is launching a major propaganda operation in support of what they are still calling the moderate Syrian rebels, who are the U.S. proxies trying to redraw the Middle East. They're talking about the Free Syria Army, 95% of whom are not from Syria. They're hired mercenaries. The U.S. has been trying to play this game for going on 5 years. Great Britain is along with them, and we all know what's going on here. It's a covert overthrow. Now, Obama has spent $70+ billion taxpayer dollars training forces in Afghanistan who were supposed to be on our side after we kicked out the Taliban and put in a nice new puppet regime. Unfortunately, all these soldiers trained at U.S. taxpayer expense have now gone over to the Taliban. And that's why, along with everywhere else on the planet, the U.S. is having to send troops back into Afghanistan. Got to protect those oil pipelines, got to protect those opium poppy fields. The Taliban had eradicated opium production in Afghanistan. Then the U.S. shows up, and it's bumper crops all over the place. We have photos of U.S. forces guarding, protecting, harvesting, and shipping the opium. And the U.S. excuse for that is, well, if we didn't let these farmers grow opium, we don't know what they'd do for a living. Well, they'd go back to doing what they were doing under the Taliban. It's very obvious. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Keith in Montana, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to recap on something. These neocons and stuff, if they can get this 9/11 event going, there is no, suspicion of doubt that it wouldn't be a singular event if they tried to take out Trump there. They have no qualms about killing thousands of people.
You're absolutely right. They could drop a bomb on the convention.
Yeah, and it's just like I put a couple of memes up on Twitter there about how 58,000 Americans died fighting the VC, but 300,000 died fighting the VA.
Yes.
It's the same scenario where 38,000 died in Korea, where 300,000 have died fighting the VA. But, this is the same scenario, though, that the enemy is actually at the gate that's oppressing the people, and to keep their agenda going, they will do almost anything, just like the lies of Libya where 50,000 died, the lies in Syria where 200,000 plus have died. They don't care about life or death.
No, they don't. I mean, from their point of view, we're all just a herd of livestock. Remember what Henry Kissinger said about military people. They're just dumb, stupid pawns to be spent in foreign policy. Doesn't matter how many of them die as long as you got more to throw in there. That's basically the attitude that these rulers have.
So, and it's just like I did that other thing where you look at the demographics of Russia, where it's 86% Christian, and if you look at the demographics of the United States, it's just 71% Christian. So what do you do to get, propaganda-wise, to get American Christians, predominantly in the military, to go over to foreign land and kill other Christians, their own spiritual brethren?
Oh, well, they're bad Christians over there. I mean, you had the same problem, going into World War II. Germany was a Catholic nation. They'd signed a concordat with, what's his name, Pacelli, Cardinal Pacelli, who later on became Pope Pius XII. and declared Catholicism was Germany's state religion. If you read the actual Nazi party platform, it talks about how Christianity is the foundation of all we hold dear. But, they were portrayed as bad and evil Christians. Their Christianity was perverted and our Christianity is pure. And, the propagandists were desperate enough to use anything. They even hijacked the prophecies of Nostradamus to prove that we were destined to win the war against Germany. I mean, propagandists have absolutely no shame whatsoever.
Right. And one other question or statement to you there is that, did you happen to read that thing I wrote to you about refugees?
It's not ringing a bell off the top of my head here. Can you give me some of what was inside it?
Yeah, well, we're back to the scenario of World War II. The U.S. and Allied terror bombings of World War II left cities totally devastated. If you Google the amount of cities bombed in Germany and the amount of civilians killed in each city, you'll see what I mean. But those roads and highways were just strewn for miles.
Oh, yeah, I remember your email now, and you made some very, very good points about that. And it is interesting looking at some of the war zones from drone footage. If you take the color out, it looks just like that old archival footage of the destruction done in World War II. I think by any reasonable assessment, we're already into World War III. We just haven't had the one big event where all the little battles merge together and they say, oh, yes, it's a world war.
Yeah, and on top of that, when I look at the amount of so-called rapes and stuff, you can add on there, like I mentioned there, the fact that the U.S. and the UN soldiers that have raped and pillaged those nations, whether it's in Africa or whatever like that, it's the same scenario. And the only thing I can ever say is, whenever you hear something about another country, just look up the demographics of another country, and you'll see whether who's Christian, who's Islamic, who's Jewish, who's gay, who's what like that. We are all the same. The point is that the only way governments can get us to keep fighting with each other is to try to pick on some idiosyncrasy that someone else has or doesn't have, and try to say that they're bad for it,
Yeah, and we have a right to go in and kill them because they dress funny or something like that. Yeah. When you talk about the refugee crisis in Europe, and Donald Trump is right to be concerned about allowing that to happen here, those refugees pouring into Europe, they're behaving like an occupying army. They're not integrating. They're not trying to be friends. They're not trying to engage in commerce. They're behaving like an occupying military force, and that's where a lot of this hostility and violence is coming from.
Are you talking about Israel? I thought we were talking about Muslims.
No, well, they're them too as well. Yes.
All right, Mike. Love you. Take care. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now then, getting on down to Iraq. A lot of people are still looking very carefully at the move that Muqtada al-Sadr did this last weekend, where he and his people went right past security, got into the green zone, took over the Parliament building, chased the politicians down the street, and then they left peacefully. And it was clearly a message saying, if it has to be done, we're ready to do it. But let's give the current regime in Baghdad one more chance to sort out all the crime and corruption, and remember that their first obligation is to the people of Iraq. I personally don't think it's going to happen. Those people in Baghdad know that their real masters are in Washington, D.C., and they're going to go on doing what Washington, D.C. wants them to do. So we may be seeing a renewal of war in Iraq. All of these recent U.S. interventions have turned into horrible quagmires. The old model was the U.S. would go in, intervene, put in the new puppet government, over and done with, on to the next one on the game board. But it's not working like that. They've had to go back into Yemen. They've had to go back into Libya. They're having to go back into Afghanistan. They're having to go back into Iraq. The U.S. has the military might to take on these countries one at a time. But trying to maintain combat and garrison forces in all of them is a huge, huge strain, which makes this idea of going up against Russia and China at the same time even more risky. Okay, now, over in Yemen, the mission creep continues. The U.S. has sent in 100 U.S. Rangers to Laj, along with 4 U.S. planes carrying military equipment and supplies. Now, if you know anything about the U.S. military, the Rangers are the real top of the elites. They make movies about the Green Beret, but the Rangers eat Green Berets for breakfast. These are serious intervention people going into Yemen, because Saudi Arabia has not been able to convince the Yemenite people to be comfortable with their U.S.-approved installed junta, their puppet regime. Another article coming out from Investment Watch blog. Everybody understand what's going on with NATO. NATO is deploying right to the Russian border, all the time screaming that Moscow is the aggressor. Moscow's the aggressor. We've got to put all of our weapons right up on their border because Russia is aggressing all over the globe. No, they're not. Do you see Russian troops on the Canadian side of our northern border? Do you see Russian troops on the southern side of our Mexican border? Do you see Russian warships carrying out military exercises in the Gulf of Mexico? Of course not. NATO and the United States are trying to encircle Russia. They're trying to cut them off. This is all about protecting the very fragile U.S. Federal Reserve note from the Russian ruble and the Chinese gold-backed yuan. Because if the rest of the world stops using the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking, the U.S. financial system will collapse. They don't have anything else to prop it up. We've allowed our manufacturing to decline in quantity and quality. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And with the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which were designed to arm twist other countries to accept our GMO, in serious trouble, that may be falling apart. We're seeing American companies already saying, okay, we're going away from GMO. Dannon Yogurt, and they're a big company, just announced. They're not going to accept any dairy products from GMO-fed livestock or even livestock with growth hormones or anything. They want to go back to the natural stuff because that's what people are spending their money on. If they're given a choice, they're going to buy healthy. Monsanto doesn't want you to have that choice. Monsanto's idea of a perfect world is everything you eat is their GMO product, and you don't have an alternative. You're not allowed to grow food on your own property. That's a violation of the zoning laws. You will go to the store and buy this can of food-like substance. Now, the U.S. has been saber-rattling around the Straits of Hormuz. Only a few days ago, they were saying, we're going to continue our freedom and navigation exercises there, and Iran was saying, you know, this is our territory and we can close it. And so now the U.S. Navy is deciding they're going to stay out of the Straits of Hormuz, keep things calm so that the commercial ships, the oil tankers and cargo ships can continue to use that strait without interference. Because if Iran closes the strait to keep the U.S. Navy away, it's also going to shut down a lot of commerce at a time when the global economy doesn't have the resilience to survive that. Especially the oil-based economy is still struggling after that harebrained idea of an oil price war against Russia, which backfired rather horribly. Meanwhile, 120 nations belonging to the non-aligned movement are accusing the United States Supreme Court of violating international law, where their recent ruling that $2 billion in frozen Iranian assets can be paid to victims of attacks for which Iran is accused, even though there's no proof Iran did it. Now, that $2 billion in frozen Iranian assets, by the way, was supposed to be freed as part of the P5+1 deal. Iran is complying with all of the conditions of that deal. The U.S. still isn't. And Iran has appealed to the United Nations to intervene, saying that the Supreme Court ruling is basically a robbery disguised under a court order. Because anybody can accuse Iran of all kinds of crimes. Israel does it every other Thursday. But there's no proof. It is guilt by proclamation, followed by confiscation. And it's a violation of U.S., international, and treaty obligations. The Supreme Court is in the wrong. Period. End of discussion. All right, down in Venezuela, as you know, they have fallen on really, really hard times. Venezuela has been in the sights of the U.S. government all the way back to Hugo Chavez daring to sell Venezuela's oil for currencies other than the dollar. And so Venezuela has been the target of U.S. economic sabotage, and they are in serious, serious trouble right now. So there is a Venezuelan opposition who's all buddy-buddy with the U.S. government, is demanding a recall on Maduro's presidency to create a political vacuum into which a U.S. puppet regime can step on in and develop Venezuela's wealth for the money junkies, not for the Venezuelan people, and make sure that Venezuela's oil is sold only for the U.S. dollar, because by golly, you're not allowed to have a choice what currency you will use. You will use the dollar, and you will like it, or bad things will happen to your country. And apparently it's not even all that covert anymore. There's even a story out of Sputnik News where, they tried to get rid of Brazil's president by leaking NSA surveillance to the country to come up with an impeachment. That didn't work. And now Washington is trying to break the powerful Petro-Carib Energy Alliance. It's outright economic warfare to bring Venezuela back under the control of the U.S. government. And when you would think how poorly all of these interventions are ending up with chaos, terrorism, continually having to send forces back in, you'd think the U.S. would be rethinking that policy. But the attitude seems to be, hey, it worked really well since the end of World War II. It's only the last decade we've hit a snag, so we're just going to keep on doing it and hope for the best. By the way, you're not using those kids, are you? Because we could certainly use them. We're going to draft them and send them over there to enforce the will of the American empire on people who have done no wrong to us. Now, as we reported yesterday, Israel just hauled off and started bombing Gaza, and Hamas has responded. This is another major Israeli attack onto the Gaza Strip. They seem to want to do it every 2 to 3 years. And they didn't even bother coming up with an excuse. They just hauled off and attacked. And if you noticed, not a word about that in any of the American corporate media. Not a single word. They didn't mention the Rangers going into Yemen. It's all about, oh my goodness, Donald Trump. We've got, Lindsey Graham will not vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Who cares? Who cares who Lindsey Graham's going to vote for? Jeb Bush won't endorse Trump. Harumph. That's what passes for news today. The corporate TV news has gone almost all the way tabloid at this point. So let's talk about the economy. Over at Credit Suisse, the case over there has drawn 3 new suspects looking into unauthorized trades on the accounts of rich Eastern Europeans. Apparently somebody was playing fast and loose with other people's money, and it didn't work out well. And the prosecutors are probing Credit Suisse Group AG, one of its ex-wealth managers, and they've picked up 3 new suspects who are all part of this scam. When are you going to wake up and realize that these global financial institutions and private central banks are all criminal enterprises? LIBOR fraud, gold and silver rigging, interest rate rigging. This is how they get rich. They just pluck the money out of the system, and they return nothing of substantive value to it at all. By the way, latest polls are showing 70% of Germans oppose the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. This is in serious trouble. France has already said, no way are they going to sign this thing. If the Brexit does happen, that's pretty much going to be the death blow. And Monsanto's going to be screaming, go on out there and invade these people and make them buy our GMO. Now, apparently, here in the United States, wages share of the gross domestic product has been falling for 46 years straight. That's why we're all poorer. And it has certainly accelerated since 2008. And there is a serious problem there, because no economy can be sustained by concentrating all the wealth up at the very top. There aren't enough of those money junkies that can go around to all the shopping malls and buy up all the products to keep the economy going. There has to be a way for that money to recycle back down to the bottom in decent wages and salaries to pump back into the bottom of the pyramid. Otherwise, it's doomed to fail. And it's amazing how the money junkies caught up with their addiction don't seem to get that. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we are talking about the economy right now. We know that a lot of iconic American companies are in serious trouble. And now we're seeing this story from Patriot Rising. JCPenney taking emergency measures to stay afloat. The first thing occurred to me is they're going to change their name to JC Nickel. But on a more serious level, basically they're enacting emergency measures to control costs because they're facing what they call an expense challenge. Money is going out and not coming back in. Why? The American people don't have money to take to the stores and buy the products. Because the money junkies grabbed it all. Piled it up in a big pile in the middle of their living room in their mansion, and they take their clothes off and roll all over it, and they have orgasms, and they think that's the way the world is supposed to be. Now, U.S. employment gains have hit a 7-month low. Obama was out there with a press conference earlier today. We have added 160,000 workers. Isn't this great? No, it's the fewest in 7 months. And what he never talks about is how many jobs have been lost in the same period. He's trying to imply that these are 160,000 new jobs over what we had before. And no, we didn't. And the vast majority of the new jobs are all minimum wage service sector, bartenders, waiters, things like that. The high-paying jobs, manufacturing and tech, have all gone to other countries, encouraged by U.S. tax codes going back to the Bush administration and by a corporate culture on Wall Street that has no emotional connection to actually producing product or services. You know, we'll let those other people do it. We're just here to grab profit as it whizzes on by here. Now, story coming out of Investment Watch blog again, a study is showing that more and more companies are hiring freelancers in order to avoid Obamacare. As we hear warnings yet again that the rates are about to jump up by double digits, and more companies are starting to build robots for certain jobs to avoid the potential of minimum wage hikes. What's going to happen? Well, we already know Obamacare is on the verge of collapse. And if you start populating your stores and restaurants with robots and you don't have human employees, remember, your employees are also your customers. I think watching what's going on in this country right now absolutely puts the lie to Adam Smith's philosophy that personal greed and selfishness would benefit society as a whole. It doesn't work that way. And Nobel Prize-winning mathematician John Nash proved that in his doctoral dissertation. That maintaining an overview of the entire system was necessary to move it forward and progress and avoid lockups. But the Wall Street money junkies, they don't want to hear from John Nash, because it means they have to have a sense of social responsibility. They worship at the altar of Adam Smith because they can say, me buying Lamborghinis and 5 or 6 yachts is making the world better. Don't you understand? I'm doing all this for the betterment of humanity and civilization. No, they're not. They want to own Lamborghinis and 3 yachts and $5,000 watches. And by the way, I love my nerd watch, Casio. Now, as one of our callers mentioned earlier, Trump is backing the Brexit. And he's described this migration, this forced migration crisis, is a horrible thing for Europe, and yes, it is. But it is part of the stepping stone for the New World Order, and Trump's opposition to it puts him in direct conflict with those who've been trying to create a global government for decades. It's not really working out all that well. But Trump is saying that Britain would be better off without the European Union. And Europe would be better off without all this forced migration. And he's absolutely right. Look at all the upheaval and cost and friction and anger It's not going the way the New World Order people thought it was going to go, because all of their plans are based on that idea that you can re-engineer the human mind by re-engineering the environment, and that is a flawed concept. Got to take a break here for our bottom of the hour ads. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the international scene here. Now, there's been a lot of controversy and confusion over this deal that Turkish President Erdogan was trying to arrive at for the European Union. And it has to do with slowing the flow of refugees from Turkey to the European Union. Erdogan said, in exchange, I want a visa deal for Turkish citizens to come and go into Europe whenever they want. An area of concern, given the high number of potential terrorists who would be taking advantage of that system. Well, apparently the deal has now fallen apart, and Erdogan is saying, you don't want to do what I want to do, and that's it, and he's probably going to start ramping up more of the refugees going into Europe here. Now, there's an interesting little article. This came out of Oraz.com. And it's commenting on this phenomenon about how we've all allowed ourselves to be distracted over this issue of which bathroom to use. Oh, my goodness, I'm actually a lesbian trapped in a man's body. Which bathroom should I use? And it is a distraction. It's a fringe issue everybody can argue about that doesn't threaten the money and power of the ultra-rich war hawks. You know, it's good news for Bill Clinton. He's running around Target saying, where's the women's room? Where's the women's room? I can go in there now. I'm allowed to. I think you could solve the whole thing very easily. Just change the signs on the door. Penis, vagina. Problem solved here. But it is a major distraction. It's a tempest in a teapot, and it's being done to get people looking the wrong way as bad things start to happen. The Justice Department says it will no longer call criminals convicts or felons. I guess they're just going to start using the more accurate terms of Wall Street banker and politician. But as you know, Obama issued an order that the federal government can no longer inquire into the criminal background of people that they are hiring. And as a result, the Department of Veterans Affairs hired an individual running an office already racked with credit card fraud and bribery problems, and it turned out this guy had been thrown in prison for credit card fraud, and now they put him in charge of the department. This is your government on drugs. Any questions? We're going to take a phone call here. Frank from Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael. Yeah, excellent program this afternoon. You know, you had speak about there are no jobs for Americans. Well, you are correct, but also there's an awful lot of jobs for HB1 visa labor, and that seems to be the preferential hiring for corporate America today. But I would tell you a situation that they don't seem to talk about the major media is all the diploma mills out of India, China, and Pakistan, with these people coming in with bogus degrees that have not fulfilled the requirements for those jobs.
Well, now, wait a minute. First of all, there are diploma mills here in the United States of America. And we even have caught some of our politicians who have these things on the wall of their office, and it is just a diploma mill. The reality is, because of America's educational system and turning our back on high-tech and manufacturing, all the people in this country who really know how to do this stuff have left for greener shores. And they're using the H-1Bs to bring in these young students from these particularly Asian countries who actually know the job better than the indigenous American talent pool, who know they're supposed to believe in global warming but couldn't debug a LAMP server if their lives depended on it. So I don't think it's just a case of these H-1Bs coming in with the diploma mills. If they're not able to do the job performance, their visas get revoked and they get sent home. I think this is more a reflection on the fact that these H-1B visa holders are willing to work for lower money, but overall it's because they are coming in better trained in the current up-to-date state-of-the-art technology. And
well, Mike, I would just respectfully disagree. I had friends that worked for Hewlett Packard when Carly Fiorina was in charge, and she pretty much displaced the American workforce with HB1s. A lot of them did have bogus degrees. They took a wonderful product. Now, the hallmark of test equipment was HP back in the 70s and 60s.
I remember them.
He turned that she turned that into a cheap plastic junk computers, the lowest quality with the cheapest workers, and they didn't understand pollution technology.
Frank, you just hit you just hit the nail on the head. Carly Fiorina did this. This was her choice to do. We almost lost our little production company. When we were just starting up, Carly Fiorina was in charge, and I went to buy Hewlett-Packard equipment because I'd become familiar with Hewlett-Packard, when I was at JPL, and it was the very best that you could get. But what we were getting with that Hewlett-Packard logo on there was stuff that was locking up. The first batch of CD-ROM burners that we got were good for maybe 2 weeks. They were manufactured in Hungary, which is not exactly known as a high-tech manufacturing center. But this wasn't the fault of the H-1B visa workers. This was Carly Fiorina's executive decision to value engineer Hewlett-Packard, exploit the name and reputation for a quick payoff. And she wound up getting fired for it and almost destroyed Hewlett-Packard.
I agree. A good program, Mike. I think we agree on that. She did destroy a very good company, and she turned it into junk, basically, and they produce junk still today, in my opinion, but they were the hallmark of test equipment back in the 70s.
They were wonderful. I mean, I still have, my HP 51C, I think it is, 50G. I have my HP 50G calculator, and I absolutely love it. And I only got it because my HP 21, whatever it was, they last forever. They really do, and it's good stuff. Now, I'm going to be a little bit accurate. Because of the lack of selection in our local stores, I have been required to buy some Hewlett-Packard equipment to replace things. And I have to be very honest in telling you that my current HP Document Center is definitely cut above its predecessor in terms of reliability and doing what I want it to do. So Hewlett-Packard seems to be pulling itself back from the Fiorina phase.
That's a good thing, Mike. She did
I agree.
Destroy Hewlett-Packard, and she done the same thing with Lucent, and it's just a shame that these American young students that have worked so hard in college cannot find work at these high-tech industries, and they do prefer HB1s for low wages or maybe substandard. And they're willing to work for anything that is above what they're making in their native land.
Yes.
And it is destroying the middle class.
I agree, but, any tyranny destroys the middle class because it's from middle class that opposition to oligarchy arises. The Soviet Union designed their entire system to never have a middle class. When King George III was trying to bring firmer control to the American colonies, all of his policies and currency acts were directed at reducing the middle class. Rulers hate the middle class. They want everybody to be a serf or a slave or whatever term, the great proletariat they're going to use for it. Thank you for the phone call, Frank. We're going to switch over to Steve in Massachusetts. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to talk about that story that broke out about Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz.
I think that was a distraction, and I think they threw it out there trying to distract people away from his constitutional eligibility, because it was thrown all over the web, and yes, it does look like Rafael Cruz, and there's reason to think, because of his history, that he was tangled up with the CIA and with George Herbert Walker Bush. But I never really thought it was worth pursuing, because even if it was absolutely 100% true, it doesn't affect Ted Cruz as a candidate, whereas his constitutional eligibility was always a major, major problem. In any event, he's dropped out, and so it's really not an issue any longer. If he can't be president, he can't be vice president. If Donald Trump wants to make him attorney general, fine. Ted Cruz does qualify to serve as attorney general. I don't have a problem with that one tiny bit.
Well, the reason I mention it, too, because it seems like the same recycled people are coming back over and over again for decades. They said that Rafael went to Canada after the assassination of JFK, and he worked for Zapata Oil.
Yes.
And after he went to the United States, where he went to the United States, and Ted Cruz was born, and he worked for the Bush's family and met.
It's entirely possible that Rafael Cruz was part of Operation Mongoose. And remember, when Batista fell and Castro took over, all of Batista's people and all of the CIA assets in Cuba had to get out. And they all wound up in Florida and New Orleans and all those Gulf states. So it certainly cannot be ruled out. But at this point, with Cruz out of the presidential race, it strikes me as being kind of an irrelevancy at this point. I'm sure there's some historian who wants to look into it to fill in another gap in that story about the JFK assassination, but it's not germane to our current race to the general election, okay?
Okay, one more quick thing.
Okay.
In the book State Affair,
yes.
It was a fiction, but they had, I forgot the character's name, but he stated a lot of things, and were those facts about, like they show a little area in the Arctic Peninsula where they just focused on that one little area that's been melting for, hundreds of years.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Michael Crichton in the book State of Fear, he always had good solid science underneath his stories, all the way back to Andromeda Strain. But with State of Fear, he knew going in it was going to be a controversial book, and that's why it's footnoted so heavily. And where they come on out and talk about what's going on, it is real valid science. Now, in the middle of the book, there's this character who comes on up and talks about how Yellowstone got destroyed by the very best environmental experts. There were no greedy corporations causing the damage. And that actually came out of one of Michael Crichton's own speeches on chaos theory and the environment. And unfortunately, that speech has been taken down from the web. He endured a lot of pressure from the global warming cult when he came out with that book. And since his passing, his estate has been less than willing to show some spine and stand up and say this is an important book. You can still find it in the bookstores. I think you can certainly find it in the used bookstores. It's called State of Fear, and it's one of the best Michael Crichton books out there because by the time he wrote that one, he'd made his money. He was perfectly happy with what he had. He wasn't feeling greedy. And the last several books he wrote were serious attempts to inform the public about some dangerous trends in science.
Yeah, and another passage, he wrote that every time they mentioned global warming, there was a snowstorm, so they had to get around of creating another fear. Now, do you think they had a play in creating extreme weather, where they had to go to another extreme to create this global warming fear? No,
the storyline of the book has them staging environmental disasters that they will then blame on global warming. That part is the fiction. But we know in the real world that there's been a great deal of fraud and fakery because of the ClimateGate leaks from the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. We know they were writing the computer programs to get a desired result, not accurately portray the raw data. And it has been a fraud from top to bottom. And it's a very good book. I recommend it highly. And thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here because I'm coming up on the top of the hour and the Lady Claire, and I got a bunch of stuff I want to get to before then. Story coming out of Extra Public TV. Cops rarely punished when judges find testimony is false. I'm not too surprised. Neither should you be. Sort of a little click there. Now, here's a story. It's breaking all over the web today. Apparently over in New Jersey, the police arrested this woman for refusing to speak to them during a traffic stop. And then, of course, during the arrest, had to inform her of her right to remain silent. And yet, that's what they arrested her for, refusing to talk to them. I mean, are these cops so drugged out they don't understand the absurdity of what they just did? A woman who has a right to remain silent has been arrested for remaining silent. Now, over in Paris, there's a video that has just angered a lot of people of Paris police searching a triple amputee man at the train station. For some reason, the cops just decided that this guy who only has one arm needed to be searched, and they literally dismantled and took apart his prosthetic other arm and legs and just left him on the ground and walked away. Somebody got it on video. It's all over. And this guy they searched said, you got to help me put this all back together. I can't do it with just the one hand. And the cops just walked away. Sort of paraphrase Ron White. You got to be a real manly man to take apart a triple amputee's prosthetics. I love this story. This is out of PatriotRising.com. Over in Massachusetts, There's a Massachusetts state chemist whose job is testing evidence for drug prosecutions. And it turned out, most of the time she was on the job, she was high. She was high on things she was making right in the laboratory, including crack, cocaine, meth, and acid. For pretty much the 9 years she worked for the Massachusetts government, including 1 year working directly for the police lab. And obviously, all of the lawyers for all of the people who were convicted on evidence she provided are now going to have an open invitation back to court saying the evidence is tainted. The chemist was stoned. Now, as you know, earlier today, there's been multiple shootings up in Maryland. 3 people are dead following separate shootings over the past 24 hours up in Maryland, and the shooter turned out to be a law enforcement officer, had recently been placed on administrative leaves. I think if we want to end violence in the street, it's time to disarm the police, because they're killing more innocent Americans than the terrorists are. And under the civil forfeiture laws, they're stealing more from the American people than the robbers, burglars, and muggers put together. It really is out of control. When a government has to survive by pillaging its own people, you know it's getting close to the end. Remington Firearms is going to close its plant in Kentucky. They're going to merge its operation into their Huntsville, Alabama operation. They're going to try and take as many people with them as they can and have one big factory instead of 2 small ones. And business is booming. For some strange reason, one of the most popular items to buy for Mother's Day are firearms. The perfect gift in this very dangerous age. Get Mother a shotgun or a purse gun or something. I remember there was this firearms maker TV show. I think it was called Red Jacket Arms was the company. I actually forget the name of the show itself. But it was interesting. They were making guns that were enameled in hot pink. And women were buying them. And that's cool. I think everybody ought to be trained to use firearms safely, and everybody ought to have guns as the criminals continue to run wild across the world. Okay? That's where I am. I come from a culture where you got your first gun at age 12. You were taught how to use it safely. And there were no mass shootings. We didn't have any of these problems because everybody was armed and everybody was polite. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire here. And for those of you who are science buffs like myself, quick reminder that next Monday there will be a transit of Mercury across the sun. It will be absolutely visible from the mainland United States. It will be visible here in Hawaii right at sunrise. It happens maybe 13 times a century. The last one that was visible was back in 2006. I got pictures of it. And so you can look at that. Now then, let's get into computers here, because I used to joke about how Microsoft was going to send out a patch to cripple older machines to force you onto Windows 10, and it looks like it's actually happened. Because if you have a computer with an Asus motherboard, Microsoft put out a patch to enable what is called secure boot, where the computer will be checking signatures and authorization on the boot code in order to try and protect you from some of these cyber criminals. There's only one small problem. It bricks the Asus motherboards. Microsoft has already indicated they have no plans to fix this patch. The official recommendation is you should update to Windows 10, because Secure Boot is fully supported on Windows 10. And I think a lot of people are just very, very angry about that. Apparently, there's another concern coming on out. This is from ZDNet.com. The bloatware installed on Lenovo devices has a serious flaw. It allows malware to run at the system level, talking right to the bare metal. We are dealing with cyber criminals who are running rampant, a government that is completely uninterested in doing anything about the problem, and hardware and software makers who, in the name of quicker, faster profits, are putting out some very reckless writing that just leaves us wide open to these hackers. Now, apparently, in the wake of that stink between the FBI and Apple regarding the San Bernardino phone, the Los Angeles Police Department demonstrated they could hack into an iPhone 5S, demonstrating they don't actually need the Apple back door. And this was last March 18th. The LAPD brought in this, quote, forensic cell phone expert, end quote, who was unidentified at the time. And so all of a sudden, we're taking another look at that strange story that came out of Apple's corporate headquarters, where a 25-year-old software engineer named Edward Makowiak is reported to have shot himself in the head at the company headquarters in Cupertino. And what's strange is Apple has been not been forthcoming with details about what he did there. His LinkedIn page has been removed, and his Twitter account has been deleted. It's like they're digitally erasing this guy, which calls into question the rush to judgment that it was a suicide. Absolutely honest, it was a suicide. Okay, Al Gore read his global warming poem on CNN, huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Not a very good poet. As a result, snow started falling in Great Smoky Mountains National Park and in Winston-Salem, South Carolina. Just Mother Nature saying, yep, there you are. All right, we're going to take a break for our station ID. Back with the Lady Claire after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And for those of you watching on BAM User, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to share the third hour on Fridays with us with her unique perspective on the world. So what's your first topic?
Well, apparently the Pentagon has begun the process of loading tanks onto ferries in Bulgaria to make their way across the Black Sea to Batumi in the Republic of Georgia to do an exercise with about 650 U.S. Military and about 150 Brits.
Makes it kind of... Why couldn't they just do the training exercise where the tanks were parked? I'm almost ready to question the official cover story of all these things. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
NATO is running up to the borders of Russia and screaming, Russian aggression, Russian aggression.
Yeah, it's
they really want they were. Yeah.
It's pre-positioning, and then again, NATO is targeting Russia with planned missile defense expansion. Now, honey, this started in Romania, but in about a week, they're breaking ground on a missile defense system in Poland. And it seems to me only a question of when rather than if we're looking at war with Russia, either on the Eastern Front because of the picador-like activity of NATO or in Syria, and I'll get to that a little bit later.
Well, I think at this point, yes, it's very obvious the U.S. is trying to prepare for a great state war, and they know the country's in trouble, and they think a new world war is going to get us out of it, and they're wrong because we're going to lose this one. Mm-hmm. And there's one other factor to keep in mind. All of these anti-missile systems that the U.S. is sending to Europe are built around a doctrine of a ballistic inbound target following a predictable curved path through the sky. And the latest generation Russian and Chinese missiles don't play that game anymore.
No.
They dipsy-doodle, they corkscrew, they go up and down and left and right, and you cannot predict where they're going to be with enough accuracy to put an interceptor in front of them.
Right. And added to this, Russia is strengthening its permanent naval presence in the Mediterranean Sea. A ship, the Ladny, departed from Sevastopol to join the group of Russian vessels that are now permanently situated in the Mediterranean. This didn't used to exist, Michael.
No, it didn't. But,
yeah.
you know, I'm sure that Russia and China have been watching the United States for the last 13 years, and this constant program of belligerence and invasion and drone striking and overthrow, and they know, they had to conclude, obviously, the ultimate target was for the U.S. to become the superpower of the entire world. It was laid all out by the Project for the New American Century that wanted 100 years of war that would leave the United States the unquestioned ruler of the earth. Mm-hmm. And other countries really aren't all that happy with that idea when they see how well the U.S. government is treating this nation and how poorly we're all living and our infrastructure is crumbling. So Russia and China have quietly been getting ready, and they have been building weapons that are intended to be cost-effective weapons as opposed to the American approach, which is we're going to make all kinds of money by loading up this stuff with a bunch of junk that doesn't work.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when Russian and Chinese weapons are deployed, they not only perform to spec, they may perform above and beyond. But there is this culture of corruption in the U.S. weapons program because the companies that make the weapons are not above handing out lots of money to the Congress people who support their companies getting the contracts.
Yeah, it is. It's a corrupt system. And Eisenhower did warn us all about it when he talked about the military-industrial complex, that when you get an industry that is that powerful and that wealthy, it will work to skew the government to its own purposes. We've seen that with the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the security-industrial complex, and all of these. And it's aided and abetted by a government that has gone totally into fascistic thinking, where they're out there and available for sale to the highest bidder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to congratulate a Russian orchestra which gave a surprise performance in Palmyra in Syria. It was the Mariinsky Theater, and they staged this concert in, I guess, an attempt to win hearts and minds. And it was held just over a month after Russian airstrikes pushed the Islamic State militants out of the city. And I have a couple of things to say about the conductor, about the players, and Vladimir Putin for pulling this all together. God bless you all, because music is the universal language. Music touches in a way that can heal and comfort people like nothing else can. And I think it was extraordinary that these guys got together with their conductor and said, okay, we're going to do this in the middle of a war zone, which is exactly what they did.
Well, the war has left that part of Syria, and I think the significance of the orchestra coming on in, as you said, it's a healing moment to basically tell the Syrians, okay, we're through the worst of this, life is going back to normal, there's going to be art, there's going to be culture, and, it's time to go back to, a peacetime point of view until the U.S. shows up to blow everything up again.
Right. And speaking of Syria, an ex-CIA officer has made the accusation that the U.S. knows Syrian rebels are cover for al-Nusra Front. I mean, hello. They're supposed to be the alleged moderates, and they're not. And the government is funding and bringing weapons. They're getting treated, I believe, in Israeli hospitals.
Yes.
That's one of the most recent things. And there was a companion piece in Global Research coming out of Canada. And it says, U.S. NATO is not prepared to let go of Syria. And what it stated was that earlier this month, thousands of rebels, so-called moderate rebels, streamed into Syria through Turkey, which has just been this very open conduit for this to have happened, for the battle for Aleppo. Because if the Syrians retake Aleppo, it's all over, the Syrian army.
Well, they still have to deal with Raqqa, but at this point the writing is on the wall, and I think that's another reason for Kerry to come on out with this statement that Assad has to step down by August, or the U.S. is going to take a different track, which I suspect is going to be a decapitation strike. It is very clear that the United States is not willing to let go of their agenda of regime change in Syria. Because this idea of capturing all the resource-rich areas of the world and shackling them to the U.S. dollar, it's an all-or-nothing deal. There can't be any exceptions, because if there are, that's where the rest of the world is going to go to buy oil, so they don't have to go through the scam of the U.S. Economic system siphoning off a percentage of the buying and selling of these oil resources.
Yeah, I think that, plus Kerry's statement about the 1st of August, signals that they're going to try something very desperate. And again, it seems to me just a matter of when the timing will be, rather than if the U.S. will find itself at war with Russia. And as soon before the elections as they can, because I'm thinking, Mike, that internal polls in the White House show Trump trouncing Hillary very handily.
That seems to be the general trend here. And I think what we're probably going to be seeing here is that Bashar al-Assad is going to bomb the GOP convention in Cleveland killing off Donald Trump, gosh darn it, and therefore we will be off to war with Syria, and Jeb Bush will be the candidate to go up against Hillary.
No.
I'm joking, but have you seen how recently so many of my jokes actually turn into reality? That's
scary.
A little scary.
It's more than scary.
All right, here's a joke.
Yes.
Millions of dollars are going to fall out of the sky into my lap any minute here.
That's a good joke, dear. I like that joke.
Because I self-identify as a millionaire, and if you don't send me money, then you're just being intolerant and racist. Okay.
That's hysterical. Oh, speaking of intolerant, Obama made a very interesting comment on Donald Trump. He said the presidency is not a reality show. And
this from a guy who spends like every third minute in front of a camera?
Yeah. I mean, hello. I find these statements very richly ironic because before he was nominated to the Democratic Party to run as president, his long history was completely blocked from public investigation. You know, what about President Obama's life in Indonesia, his hidden college transcripts, and occasionally using the name Barry Soetoro? Oh. What about his time at BIC, which is a known CIA front? What about promising the most transparent administration in history when he completely has sealed up the TTIP documents?
Oh, it's completely transparent from him looking at us. We're completely, it's just not transparent the other way here. Now, the reason his college transcripts were sealed is, as you know, back in 2008, Hillary launched this idea that Obama had been born in Kenya. Now, we know that's false. We live right here in Oahu. We confirm for ourselves he was born here. But because of his heritage, when Obama went to college, he applied as a foreign student to get the special foreign the student aid that domestic students couldn't get. So he fibbed a little bit, but it was something he didn't want the American public to see. In any event, Obama's on his way out. We need to focus on the ones who are on their way in.
Yeah. And the interesting comparison I make is that as a president, unfortunately, Obama has been an epic fail for the American people.
Yes.
But
he's been great for Israel and Wall Street.
And the one percenters.
Yes.
And the administration keeps fudging the employment figures and ignoring the 30 million who have been out of work for a long period of time.
90.
Yeah, and Obamacare is a disaster.
Yes.
Down the cold, long gaze of history, he is going to appear to have been an absolute epic fail.
And there's something else that's kind of sad about this. Looking at Obama's job performance, it's actually going to be a very, very, very long time before anybody's going to look at voting for another black person for president just because they're black. And there's a reminder there. Nobody should be voting for Hillary just because she's a woman. We need to look at qualifications of job performance and ideology and what they're actually going to do. It's funny. Obama says that the presidency isn't a reality show. Well, it's also not a fashion show either.
Yeah.
And it should be a meritocracy, but unfortunately it is not.
Yeah, we're looking at more wars coming in this election year. And this is not taking care of the American people. It's taking care of the one percenters and the military-industrial complex.
And that is fascism.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to kind of move over to Big Pharma, a couple of articles there of interest.
One of our favorite subjects.
Yes. Big Pharma knowingly created prescription drug epidemic and raked in billions. Apparently, the LA Times did an investigative report revealing that the company that sells the opiate painkiller OxyContin knew the drug was highly addictive, but pushed it anyway. And one of their claims to fame with this company it's the Purdue company, that it was supposed to provide 12 hours of continual relief, but it didn't, and it also created the problem of dependency and withdrawal. And, they made, millions and millions and millions from this drug, knowing that it was a problem, and knowing that it was going to cause dependency problems for the patients who took it.
Well, which puts them down on the same moral level as the tobacco companies.
Yeah.
That we're boosting the nicotine content of cigarettes to make them more addictive, because nothing improves your bottom line like a dependent customer who is always going to be coming back to you until they die.
Yeah, that's really a tragedy. And there is one thing to know about all high-level executives of drug companies. Before accepting that corner office and the well-paying position, they have to have their consciences surgically removed in order to be able to lie.
No, they have a pill for that now.
Well, they have a pill for that.
They have a pill for that.
They don't have to do surgery.
Week after week after week, and it absolutely suppresses the guilt index or the humanitarian aspects of the brain.
And another having to do with the medical community. 2 more MMR vaccine whistleblowers are coming forward, and they are suing.
Good.
The bigger the lie, the bigger the truth it is concealing. The truth is what people are afraid to accept. That's from John Rappaport. And there are whistleblowers, a gentleman by the name of William Thompson, who confessed that he and a CDC colleague lied and cheated and omitted vital data in order to give the MMR vaccine a free pass and claim it had no connection to autism when it did.
So this is parallel to the William Thompson, because now we're hearing that Thompson has reached a deal with CDC for a very generous research grant to go back and reevaluate his original report. From which we can conclude he's been bought. With enough money, anybody can be bought.
Yeah.
And so they're going to come back and say, well, Thompson changed his mind, and this report wasn't rigged, and there's no link. So we've got these other people coming on out. But even without the autism connection, we've got the peanut oil anaphylaxis connection.
Yep.
We have the fact that even the CDC is admitting vaccines only work half the time.
Yeah.
And we're looking at incidents like just happened at Harvard, where the people getting the vaccine come down with the illness.
With the mumps, right?
With the mumps in this case here. And we have that study from Johns Hopkins that said the third leading cause of death in the United States of America is medical mistake. And that has to include being given drugs and treatments that aren't safe, aren't effective. They're just being thrown on you to make money. We know that there's a raging epidemic of false diagnoses of cancer in order to sell radiation and chemotherapy. I think one of the most heartless things that some of these oncologists can do is they'll diagnose a patient with an absolutely incurable terminal case of cancer, and they'll still say, take the chemo and the radiation. Who knows, you might get lucky. And these people whose lives are ending shortly anyway spend their last few months on Earth dealing with the effects of chemo and radiation, all to make a fast buck. I'm actually glad they threw that one doctor in prison for 45 years.
Yes.
But they didn't throw him in prison for the false diagnosis and harm to the patient.
No.
They threw him in prison because he defrauded Medicare.
Yeah. I mean, we saw this happen with a very dear friend of ours who passed. And, he was taking chemo almost up to the very end, and the cancer metastasized. And, there is a point where the doctor really needs to get off that and give them as much pain medication as they need to get over the pain and maybe have them look at hospice care.
Yeah, but again, it's all driven by money. And the more a nation sinks into debt, the more that awareness of debt and striving to pay that debt undermines all other aspects of the nation and society. This need to get pieces of ink and paper to make the money junkies happy has destroyed what used to be the best characteristics of the American people.
Yeah.
We used to feel good about ourselves because of who we are, what we could do. And now it's wearable esteem and how much money we've got. We really have ceased being the greatest nation on earth, and we are definitely headed to a fall.
Well, when you take a look at shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians, you can
Which I don't.
No, but it's an interesting sociological statement and the agendas that it's pushing. And that is that the way you look is more important than what you do.
Well, I remember Billy Crystal used to make jokes about that. It's better to look marvelous than to feel marvelous. And it really is. And even all the way back to THX 1138, one of George Lucas' first successful films, and then he did a director's cut. And there's the Robert Duvall character is in this little confessional at the church, and there's this fluorescent lit Jesus who says, consume more, buy, and you will be happy. And we're just about there right now.
Yeah, and it's such a false dichotomy. I mean, I've looked at, sort of as a guilty pleasure, little bits of the Real Housewives of fill in the blank of the demographic they're looking at. I don't know these people,
I don't want to know them.
I don't want to know them either. I mean, I know people who are artists. I know people who work. I know people who create successful businesses. And I got to tell you, those are the people I really want to hang around with.
Yeah, and they were going to try and do a Real Housewives of Honolulu, but I think it kind of fell apart because the indigenous Hawaiian people haven't quite gone into this whole materialistic, my entire self-worth is what I'm wearing on my body today. Yeah. But I understand the franchise has made its creator millions and millions and millions of dollars. Oh, I don't know why. I don't understand why anybody would watch these shows. But apparently somebody is.
Because that is, again, going back to the sociological perspective, that is where some women want to identify as not having to work because their jobs are pretty awful and wanting to be able to wear the latest and greatest and to identify by that rather than by identifying as who they are as a human being, what they do, what they can create, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they just want to be kept women or trophy brides. That's the new social ideal. We're the feminists striving in vain. We're going to have to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after 3 minutes, continuing with the lovely Lady Claire. Mm-hmm. And aloha, welcome back to the show. And Claire, what's your next story for us?
Well, there are questions swirling around Turkey and its leader, Recep Erdogan. He has recently fired or gotten resigned his former Prime Minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, and Erdogan is now free to push for a change in the constitution which would give him even more personal power.
Yes.
The West desperately needs for this country to remain stable, and in fact, Turkey has NATO's second largest army. And a lot is riding, but there are a lot of people who are feeling very oppressed in Turkey in the current circumstances.
Especially all those journalists who were trying to report on what's going on, and they're being thrown in prison.
And the newspapers seized and closed up.
Yes.
And the way that he has treated the Kurdish population, when you deny political representation, you encourage radicalism and violence. And, the Kurdish population is extremely angry right now. I think that the biggest factor, and I'd like to run this by you, in terms of whether Erdogan stays or goes, will be the head of his military. And if they feel that they're taking Turkey in the right direction, which seems to be more of a slide toward an Islamic republic in and of itself.
Yeah, but as long as the U.S. government feels that Turkey is going to continue to be allied with the United States agenda. They don't care if it's Islamic or Christian or Jewish or atheistic. Those are just labels to try and buy and sell public support for wars of aggression. So I don't think that's really going to be a factor unless Erdogan comes down and he's replaced by somebody who wants to draw away from the United States. Then they'll scream that they're an Islamic threat and the invasion will be on. I think Erdogan is showing the signs of somebody who is suffering from megalomania, both with his behavior toward his own people, his desire to make himself El Presidente for life, and just his arrogance toward the Europeans. And I think when you see that kind of symptomology in a leader who has that little popular support in his own country, it is a situation ripe for an internal coup. Yeah. And hopefully people won't get hurt, but they could if there was something very drastic that would go on in this country. Yeah, very much so. What's next on your list?
Next on my list, Saudi Arabia is suddenly facing a serious catastrophe. Running out of money, I would call it very serious. That's a big deal. You know,
whoopsie, we started an oil price war, and,
it bit us in a very sensitive portion of our anatomy.
Saudi Arabia is having to actually sell bonds for the first time in something like 3.5 decades.
Sovereign Wealth Fund.
And you know what's really interesting? It could reach the point where Saudi Arabia turns to the United States and says, we need our money back now. And that would be a serious, serious problem for the U.S. economy.
Yeah. Apparently, the Ben Laden Group, anyone familiar with that name, the good old buddies of the Bush family?
Yes.
It's the largest construction company in the kingdom. They have terminated the employment of 50,000, count them, 50,000 foreign workers. Now, they're being issued exit visas, which the workers are not honoring because they're not being they're not going to leave without being paid their back wages. And angry with their employers, some of the workers set fire to 7 of the company's buses. I would say that they're not happy campers.
That would definitely do it.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that Bin Laden Construction has run into hard times, given that the U.S. uses them for all military-based, almost all military-based construction all over the Middle East. And yes, there's competition from Kellogg Brown Root and these other groups. But I'm very surprised. You know what it tells me is going on here is the U.S. is running out of money to pour into these wars, and they're not building as much new material as they used to. They're just trying to refurbish and reuse old stuff. We keep hearing all these talks about shortages of critical components to our soldiers on the front line.
Yeah.
And of course, ultimately, all wars are decided by economics. The country that runs out of money first usually is the one that loses.
Right, right. And apparently, China is very patiently reaching out to Saudi Arabia to provide infrastructure, to provide construction on various projects. And one thing that China knows how to do, in fact, a couple, they know how to make a deal, and they know how to wait until the time is right.
Absolutely. I mean, Russia and China are going around the world making deals while the U.S. continues to try and make war.
Right.
We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Best place to save on vitamins, minerals, and more. Log on for summer specials, including all sizes of colloidal silver, colloidal minerals, and intestinal freedom on sale. Choose from Herbal Healer's great variety of weight loss products like apple cider vinegar, Hoodia, and Metabolic Complex and Pro-Metabolic, all on sale now. Also, the anti-parasite Intestinal Freedom and Wormwood Plus Complex, plus Stevia Liquid Sweetener and the Super Enzymes, all on sale for summer at herbalhealer.com. As always, we offer certificate correspondence courses in natural medicine. Enjoy same-day shipping and free online newsletter. Log on now to herbalhealer.com and look for summer specials to save big with our nation's leader in supplying quality natural medicine and education since 1988. Herbal Healer Academy.
Welcome to What Really Happened Radio. Visit us online at WhatReallyHappened.com. And now, set your eyes on the future, and let's consider what really happened.
Yeah, aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And lovely Lady Claire, what do you have next for us?
This comes, I swear, honey, from the Department of You Cannot Make This Stuff Up.
But we'll try anyway.
Believe it or not, students at a Spanish college are forced to take an exorcism class. Now, please understand, this is a publicly funded college in Spain, has told its kids that it is compulsory to attend a course given by a priest who is an expert in exorcisms. The University College of Barberán and Collán, Colegio Mer Universidad, is connected to the Public Research Institute, Complutense, University of Madrid, and is also funded by Spain's Defense Ministry. Now, does that not sound ironic? The college is requiring its 196 students, who are all members of military families, to attend a theological conference focused on the fields related to the devil, exorcisms, being possessed, and hell, according to newspaper El Diario. A woman who answered the phone at the college told the local that there was a seminar about exorcism, but could not immediately confirm the details.
Well, you know what happens if you don't pay your exorcist, right?
Yes, you get repossessed.
You get repossessed. All right, but what's your next story?
Well, the next story is about the increase in food insecurity in obscure and difficult places in the United States, hard to get to. And this is increasing particularly among kids, where they don't have an access to any kind of store, and food banks are complaining that their resources are pretty much dried up. And I think, frankly, we need to take care of our own people long before we take care of anybody else. And as long as one child goes to bed, hungry, no, we can't afford that big shiny new bomb for Israel. I'm sorry. You feed and you take care of Americans
It's even more
first.
basic than that. As long as there is one homeless American sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash bins, we have no business allowing illegal immigrants to pour into this country, soaking up our social services. We have no business allowing Middle Eastern refugees to pour on in here. And it is just shameful that these refugees and illegals are getting more of our tax dollars from supposedly our government than our children and our Social Security recipients. And you have to wonder, what is their priority? And the priority is they're trying as hard as they can to finish their New World Order and just blend everybody together, make us forget about the Confederate flag, make us confused over which restroom we're supposed to use, make us forget that we have a regional history or cultural identity, and just have one formless mass of serfs permanently working to keep the ultra-wealthy rich forever.
Serf consumers.
Yes, the serfdom, the rise of neo-feudalism. Let's call it that.
And this really hurt my heart because Mike and I, as you probably know, are very involved with a couple of food programs, one that is sponsored by my church and also sponsored by the local Catholic church, which I kind of like, two groups getting together to benefit people. But the need is getting greater and greater. We don't volunteer actually at the food distribution, but the last couple of times we did, I mean, Mike, did it look to you like those lines were getting a lot longer?
They were getting a lot longer, and there were young people there. It's not just old people. It's not just druggies and everything.
No.
Families, entire families were showing up because they needed the help. And the reason we don't volunteer at the food distribution anymore is not because we simply decided to quit, but Claire is now the choir director at her church, and rehearsal night is the same night.
So we can't.
We made our apologies. We still support them. We still round up food and take it on over there, but we don't participate in the handing out, which is a bit of a loss, because if you get involved with a food program around your home, you should make a point of going on down there and handing the food to the people yourself. It's going to be your Buddha on the road moment, because you're going to realize that everything you've heard from the corporate media about America's hungry and homeless being undeserving, and they chose to be this way, and you shouldn't care about them. They're scamming the system and buying lobster with their food stamps. That's all a hoax. They want you to feel sympathy for the illegal immigrants, but not for your fellow Americans. And that right there gives away this whole New World Order agenda at work, right in your face.
There were a couple of images that I took away with me. As most of you who know a little bit about Hawaii know, we have a very large Samoan population. And I remember this very beautiful Samoan young lady who was shopping with her family, very obviously expecting a baby. And I remember looking at this kid and thinking, does she know to take the prenatal vitamins? Is she even able to afford them? Is she getting any prenatal medical care at all? Or is the only time she's going to see a doctor is when she starts in labor? And it just...
Maybe not even then.
Yeah, it broke my heart. And yes, there are many older, wise women who've been through the process who can help. But, given my druthers, I'd rather be in an environment where I've got medical professionals around me who know how the drill needs to go. And the other image, and Mike, I think you'll remember, there was this gentleman who walked with a cane, had a beautiful smile, had two beautiful little girls. Do you remember that guy?
Oh, I remember him very, very clearly. Yeah. And the children, it's amazing how resilient children can be.
Yeah.
Because the kids were happy. And, nobody's told them yet. They're poor and destitute and the rest of it.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the videos that we did for Claire's music was, Lord, help us make this world a better place.
Yes.
And you can see some of the faces of the kids, and they think life is great. And they don't know how fragile it is, which is a good thing. No reason to burden them.
One of the nicest things about the people who were part of the program, they never made people feel bad about accepting the aid that had been gathered for them. And they were very good with the children. They even had children's tables where they could do
they had arts and crafts, and they had a collection of toys and shoes and everything. It was more than just the food.
It was a destination.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And there is also another story related to this that just made my blood boil. R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company, has been using tobacco harvested by underage kids as young as 13 or younger. And it's like, hello, this is child slavery. I can't understand it. I can't understand why the farmers in this program are doing this. And many, many years ago, when I lived in Northern California, I had a friend who moved to Watsonville. Watsonville was at the time a very heavily agricultural area. And my friend decided she was going to pick berries in the summer to get a little bit more pocket money. And so she said, come on, it's going to be fun. Well, I have never in my life been treated like such a subhuman ever.
Yes.
It was one of the most mortifying experiences, and I remember getting home on a very hot day, and the linoleum floor was very cool and inviting, and I remember just lying down on the floor because it was cool and thinking, I really think I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to graduate.
Okay, I'm going to take your mic down so you can clear your throat here and get rid of the frog there. Now, probably most of you remember Cesar Chavez, who helped organize the farmers in California. And if you ever saw him in his office, on his desk was a short-handled hoe. And the story behind that was that these farms that were hiring these migrants wouldn't spend the money for a long-handled hoe so that you could do your work standing up. They would provide these short-handled hoes so that you had to do your work constantly bent over, stooped over, back pain, all kinds of trauma, and it became one of the icons of the psychological oppression that was being used against these people. So when Cesar Chavez organized everybody, the farm started getting long-handled hoes, and he kept the short-handled hoe on his desk as a reminder. I'm putting Claire's volume back up here again, and what would you like to talk about next?
I would like to talk about next is this story of people with various degrees. Mike, could you pull my pod down real quick?
Okay, I'm going to let you go. All right, well, a little bit of a frog. Here's some water for you. That's okay. I'm going to talk about the oil sands town in Canada. Fort McMurray's had a terrible fire going for the last few days. Out of control. So far, 25,000 acres, 1,600 structures, 88,000 people required to lose their homes. And already the carbon Nazis are out there saying, see, it's global warming that created this absolute disaster ready to go. Well, not exactly. What has happened is that years of fire suppression have resulted in the accumulation of a dead brush overburden, which is an invitation to a major fire. Now, normally, if you're running a good government, you will take steps to get rid of that overburden. You'll take it away to a landfill, or you'll have controlled burns. You will, at the very least, maintain good fire break roads through the area. And this was not being done by the Alberta authorities. They just let the situation get out of control until it had the conflagration, and, we'll blame global warming for it. Maybe, maybe not. There is now reason to suggest that this could be an act of eco-terrorism. The targeting of this town on top of a tar sands facility raised a few eyebrows, but apparently there's now a second wildfire in Canada near an oil and gas operation in British Columbia. Same exact latitude as Fort McMurray. So we'll see what's developing there. And are you ready to go? Yes. All right, I'm going to bring up Claire's microphone again.
And another story that I noticed out of Zero Hedge, and it's a phenomenon. What?
I'm hearing your voice. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm being rude.
It's a phenomenon that we're going to see a lot. Kids graduating from college with degrees, and there are no jobs for them, and they wind up having to live back at home. And it was this story of a kid who just graduated with a degree in economics, and I don't know how many resumes this kid spit out. Not one job offer. So he's going back home to live with his family because that's all he can do. And it's a story writ large, Michael, with a lot of these kids.
Well, it's all over the country. I mean, when we talk about the fact that we have 90 million Americans unable to find jobs, obviously they're living somewhere. They're not all homeless, hopefully. Yeah. And they're staying with their parents. And this, of course, puts a serious crimp on the parents' ability to retire or to downsize their home and go on about their lives. Yeah. It's all locking up. And the hard reality we all need to acknowledge right now, we are in a wartime economy for all intents and purposes. They don't want to admit it, especially in an election year. They're trying to convince you everything's fine, there's a recovery, just hang on, be patient, and golden times are here again. But all of the nation's resources are being diverted to the war effort, to buying off Israel, to propping up Wall Street. Our manufacturing has been abandoned. Our infrastructure is crumbling. I mean, if you look at the history of any nation in wartime, this is what's going on. It's a wartime economy.
And I don't know how it is with people in other states, but in our state, the potholes in the road, I mean, the roads are just falling apart.
We have the worst roads in the country, according to the National Transportation Administration.
Yeah.
And whatever they're doing to fix them, it'll last until the next rainstorm. And then there's these huge potholes. Somebody did a study and actually calculated that the average Hawaii driver will spend $700 a year fixing damage caused to their car by the deteriorated roads. Now, if you're down in the tourist areas like Waikiki, the roads are kept in good shape.
Yeah.
If you go anywhere else, they're really, really bad. Right now, they're trying to put in this light rail system down along the south edge of the island, and the roads there, because of the construction, are all torn up. They're not even trying to have a pretense of having a decent driving surface on them. Hopefully, when the light rail is finished, they'll go back over and fix some of that. Maybe not. They want everybody riding the light rail and not using their cars anymore.
And there's no parking for the cars, and that's the other problem.
Yeah, this is all being paid for out of Hawaii tax revenues. And the problem is that this rail system, when you look at where the stations are, it's primarily aimed at connecting the business hub in Honolulu with the Kapolei Business Hub, which they've been trying to build as an incubator for years to no success. And it links all the southern island tourist venues together. And as far as ordinary people like Claire and I, they don't have parking lots where you can put your car and use the rail system. I mean, I'm sure we'll come up with something. I plan on riding it as soon as it's available. But it's clearly not designed as a utility for ordinary citizens of Hawaii. It's geared toward the business community and the tourism industry.
Yeah, and a lot of smaller businesses are either struggling terribly or they've just gone out of business.
Especially along the construction route.
Yeah,
it's all blocked up. Anyway, enough about Hawaii. Do you have something else to share? Oh, wait, hang on a second. I have to make an announcement. I've just been nagged by our control room.
Okay.
When at work or play, you can listen live to RBN anytime from your phone at, write this down, area code 605-562-5111. That's 605-562-5111. And that number is also appearing at the top of my website alongside the call-in number. So if you're having difficulty listening to the show on the streams or the satellite, you can always listen to RBN at 605-562-5111. Okay? So take care of that. I think I'm just going to finish up with these few stories that I have here. We're almost to the end of the show today. Interesting little story. The FBI has arrested a man, along with the help from the Ann Arbor Police Department. They caught this guy pouring chemicals onto the food at a Whole Foods store and some other stores in Michigan. And apparently this liquid was a mixture of hand cleaner, water, and tomcat mice poison on produce in at least 3 grocery stores. And left unsaid why this guy did it or who he was working for. Now, we know that there's been a lot of industrial sabotage aimed at anybody trying to move away from GMO.
Like Chipotle.
Like Chipotle.
Yeah.
Whole Foods, definitely one of them.
Yep.
I still haven't discovered the name of these other 2 grocery stores that were in Ann Arbor, but I'm almost willing to bet a plugged Turkish piastre that they were also swinging non-GMO. Dannon can certainly expect some kind of a sabotage attack, E. coli in their yogurt or something, because these money junkies play seriously. And anybody who's a threat to their continued profits, anybody who provides a choice to the monopolies, is going to be dealt with. And they get away with it because the government is wholly on their side, and that is the definition of economic fascism. Mm-hmm. Now then, we already talked about the opioid epidemic here. Out in California, this is where the whiners are really coming on strong. There's this Jewish group is demanding the removal of a welcome sign in a Crescenta Valley Park. And the reason is this sign mentions a German World War I hero. And the Jewish group wants that all erased. They're saying, there's connections to the Nazis here. And the message is, you will forget all history everywhere except the one we made up for you to believe.
Yeah.
And that's what's going. They want to erase our memories, our past, our history, in order to more easily control us. We'll be right back after these commercials. Hello, Aloha America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program on this Kaahumanu Friday here. I love this story. This is so funny. This is from Russia Today. Apparently, over in Israel, there is a man who actually went to court to petition for a restraining order against God because God had not been very nice to him lately. Where is this going to go? Where is God going to find a lawyer?
That's hysterical.
I mean, that's really out there.
Yeah.
Now, talk about your tax dollars at work. As you know, the AIDS epidemic first exploded over in Africa, in the areas where the smallpox vaccination campaign was being done with very poorly made vaccines in very shabby facilities here. And apparently over 12 years, the U.S. government spent $1.4 billion on a program to convince the Africans to follow abstinence, to simply not have sex at all, and stop HIV that way. To nobody's surprise, the final evaluation has shown the program simply didn't work. You know, you cannot have a poster or propaganda that overrides the most basic human drive. You know, we are all delivery vehicles for DNA. Everything else is just for show. But that's what it's about. Why do we have a population problem? Because sex is a lot more fun than dying. Now, this is a little more serious and a little more alarming. Congress is considering a bill that will fund the psychological testing and mandatory profiling of all children in America. This bill, if passed, will force schools to collect all kinds of sensitive data on students, including on their social and emotional learning, attitudes, values, beliefs, much more, their orientation, stuff that's really irrelevant to reading, writing, and arithmetic. The legislation is named the Strengthening Education Through Research Act, or CETRA, and will give the big brother nanny state information on how to further indoctrinate and transform the minds of American children. Now, the problem we have with that is there is no such thing as a science of psychology. There is no machine that can be put on somebody where the needle will swing over and say manic depressive or sociopath. It's all subjective opinion by the priesthood of this religion of psychiatry.
Yeah, it's
a matter of fashion.
Yeah, it's a matter of opinion. And that's what's so scary. I mean, if I, had a kid in school and I knew that was going to be forthcoming, I'd pull them. I'd pull them immediately and homeschool them.
Well, that's why they're outlawing homeschooling, and this stuff's going to be mandated even for the private school. But it's all subjective.
Yeah.
And it changes over time. It's a matter of fashion. What is considered sane behavior today would be considered ridiculously insane in other times and cultures. In Viking times, it was considered sane to want to die with a sword in your hand. If you run around the streets of America saying that now, everybody's going to say, oh, you're crazy, put you away. And remember, much of the so-called mental illness in our country is made-up illnesses with which to sell pills, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or the latest one, orthorexia nervosa, which says that wanting to eat healthy, natural, organic, non-GMO food is now a mental illness. So we're going to prescribe you 6 Big Macs a day until you come to your senses.
Yeah. It's really terrible, the degree of governmental control that we are seeing.
It really, really is. Okay, There's the music. It's time for Claire and I to get on out of here. Have a Kaahumanu Friday afternoon. Don't forget Mercury crossing the sun on Monday. Have a good weekend. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and aloha America.